So let us start with today's webinar, right? So this is introduction to the chip design. So this covers what exactly after an electronics engineering or electrical engineering, what exactly the core of the electronics, right? So let's go ahead. So today I will be sharing these contents with you, introduction to the VLSI and evolution of the technology, what are the objectives of this IC tech, and then what are the design approaches that we are following in the industry to design a chip, and then what is the exact VLSI design flow, and how do we start designing, and what are the tools used. And I'll be explaining you a case study how exactly it is done, and then what are the modern trends of it, and what are the opportunities in VLSI, and then who all can join this particular domain, right? So yeah, let me start with introduction to VLSI. So we are all aware that VLSI is nothing but it is integration of in thousands of transistors into a single chip, right? That has a specific functionality. So let me go through the evolution, right? So at the start, the first storage computer was very huge and occupied many more area, right? So this is how we have developed through the years. So it was starting from a small scale integration that has 1 to 2 logic gates and below 10 transistors in one particular chip. Imagine for a particular specific application, right? So we need tons and tons of transistors, and it means we need tons and tons of chips when we are in SSI integration, right? So as the year progressing, as the technology is developing, we went forward and we introduced a medium scale integration which has up to 50 transistors in one single chip. It of course reduced the cost of integration, but yeah, this is also requires a specific application, requires a lot of integration chips, right? And as the year passes, we went into the large scale integration where the cost, if one transistor is less, the cost will be lesser in millions. So I say this is a huge improvement, and now we are in VLSI domain where we are integrating millions and millions of transistors in one single chip. So this is how our IC technology is developing. As the technology is developing, the nodes are changing, and then the futures are progressing, and then the entire domain is changing, right? So this is the evolution of IC tech. And yeah, so what is Moore's perception? So this Moore's law or Moore's perception tells us that how exactly the number of transistors are changing within one single chip as the year progresses and the IC tech develops, right? So this is nothing but Moore, co-founder of Intel. So this guy predicted that as the year progresses and as the technology is changing, you can accommodate these many number of transistors in early 1965s only. So he told like for every 18 months, the number of transistors that are getting introduced in one single chip will be doubled. So it means it went right the way as he said. So currently we are incorporating 512 millions of gates in one particular transistor. That's what his perception is. And then we are also on the right track as he has mentioned. And then he also said that for every microprocessor, right? So the growth of the memory that it can accept, right? One microprocessor is exponential. So we are at 4 gig or more than that, right? So today, and then this is Titanium that is mentioned here, but the microprocessor currently that is in market is Pentium Pro. So that was designed by Intel. So this is how the technology is varying and the number of transistors are increasing in one single chip, right? So this is our first step towards the improvement. And then we are introducing too many number of transistors in one single chip. What is the advantage of it, right? For every development that we have done, there must be an advantage. Otherwise, it is best to do that, right? So what are the advantages of in it? So they are like size of the circuits is compact, meaning too many number of transistors are in a single chip, which means everything is in one single tablet or a single mobile phone or in a single laptop, right? Instead of a bigger one. So here in the figure, you are seeing the first computer that is developed, and thanks to imitation games they have showed us how it exactly developed, right? So this is the first computer, and today's laptop you might have in your hand. Just comparison, we can know that what are the advantages of incorporating millions of transistors in one single chip, right? So that is what it saves the circuit complexity of the chip, and then it's also effective cost of the devices. We do not want to incorporate too many devices and the dependency increases, and then one or the other device is not working properly, then the entire chip will not work, right? So that is where the integration will go off, and then yeah, cost to buy that particular device will also be reduced. And then operating speed, yes, so if everything is in one single chip, if this chip works faster, then my operation is very faster, right? So that is how it works. And then lesser the number of integrating devices, lesser the power that is used by it. And then the reliability, because we are incorporating everything in a single chip, so our reliability increases, our dependency on other things will be reduced, right? So, and then smaller area, of course. So these are the advantages of our IC tech evolution, right? So this is why we are incorporating millions and millions of transistors in one single chip, and we are developing for more for the futures. So what are the objectives that we are dealing with while designing this IC chip is like power, performance, and area. So when we are designing a laptop, let us say, or when we are designing a mobile phone or a tablet, right? So the three things that we keep in mind is, one is area, the compacticity of the chip, meaning the smaller the tablet or smaller the mobile phone that we have, the better the things will work, right? And then the power, it should not, sometimes when you see our mobile phone should not be heated too much. It should give us a long battery life. So these are some power considerations that we take, and then we should work accordingly while designing that IC tech. And then the performance, of course, our laptop or a mobile phone or a tablet should give it optimum performance, right? Along with power and area. These are the three objectives that we do. And then, yeah, when I say performance, right, performance is always in chip industry or IC chip, right? It's always a synonym to clock frequency. So achieving the best clock frequency, and then handling increasing variability. It means, let us say you are working in a hotter place and then you suddenly go to a cooler place. Both the performance should be same. The variation to temperature, process, and voltage should be same. Area and power, as I said, longer durability and low power dissipate, right? And then the industry, right? So it was always application specific chips that were developed, and there are some gate arrays also that are being developed, but application specific are more predominant in the industry, because everything, right, one, either be it a processor or else be it a mobile application, we are going by ASIC development of it. So for developing an ASIC chip, right? So we have two approaches, like doing everything in custom, and then doing everything, half giving it to the tool and half doing it customly. So it's like when I say custom, right? So everything will take a gate. So many of us here might be electronic engineers. So we are aware of cadence switches, right? Where we take the schematic of the AND gate and create a flip flop and create a transistor. So everything will be custom based, meaning we have full control of the design, which gate we are using, which transistor we are using, which flip flop we are using. So we have the predominant control over it. But the thing is, we wanted to create an AND gate. We'll take two transistors, create an AND gate, and then we wanted to do a flip flop. We will take some transistors and do that. But what if we wanted to develop a full chip, right? So full chip, taking every transistor manually, developing it, creating a schematic, simulating it, testing and verification. So it takes a lot of time and effort. So that is what results will be better, because we are doing it everything manually, but the design time will be slow, and the manual effort that is required is too huge. That may vary our results and simulations, right? That might take time. So, but we don't want that, because the faster the chip is released to the market, the faster the money that will come into our pocket. So that is what time to market is one important thing that IC chip design industry follows. So that is where custom design is not always recommended. So we are going for a semi-custom design approach, where the current industry is also following the same. So it's like we have a software that is readily available for us, which develops the schematic, and then which iterates faster, and then we'll buy some, let us say, the IP vendors. Let us take some examples, right? So we have Synopsys as an IP vendor, which has some RAMs that are available, and ARM is one IP vendor where some memories are already available. So when it is available with them, so we need not develop it anything anyhow, right? So we will buy from them, and then we develop our chip, and we'll release it to the market, and we will trade off. There is a trade off, right? We'll buy something and then we'll sell it to a higher price. So that's how this market works. So semi-custom design are faster, and then of course CAD tools dependency that we have to check. So because tool might do something, and then we need to do custom there. but not too much of manual effort that is required when compared to the custom flow. So that is where we are going to a semi-custom design approach. How does this semi-custom design approach works, right? So how actually a chip will be designed. So first of all, let us say there is a design idea that is in my mind and I wanted to develop a chip accordingly. So that is what I have to first put out my system specification, where I wanted to say that this is my idea. I wanted, let us say, image stabilization in my mobile phone, or else I wanted 3D graphics in my mobile phone, or else AMD Ryzen, which is a gaming processor in my laptop, that I wanted. This is the specification I wanted. So accordingly, I have to get a architectural design, and then when I have an architectural design ready, this is my processor, this is how it looks like, and then I wanted to get a functional design or a logic design, meaning RTL code of it, so that I can convert into a physically implementable device, right? So getting a functional and logical design is the third step of it. And after that, yes, so there will be some IPs that are, let us say, we in mobile phone we wanted to develop a camera and we wanted a sensor to be developed. Sensor specifically, it is more analog part. RTL cannot develop a sensor physically, right? So that is where we wanted to do a circuit design in that particular time, where we take the help of the circuit designers. And also for this sensor to work, we do need some RTL logic, and then we have to control it how it works, right? So we need RTL logic. So RTL logic plus circuit design together, it will give us some code that is required to physically implement it. So that is where we'll go for a physical implementation of it. So this is called as physical design, or else a back-end design. So where we do, let us say we have a big chip, right? Single person cannot develop a big chip. Again, we are losing the reliability, and then the manual effort will increase. Right? So that's where what we do is we break the entire chip into parts, and we'll give each part to one particular person, so that effort decreases, and then faster closure also. That step is called as partitioning of the entire chip. And then once partitioning is done, we'll say that this power management should be sitting in this particular partition, this IP should be sitting in particular partition, and clock generator should be sitting in one particular partition, depending on the area that is available, and depending on the chip size and the chip design that we have, right? So it may be rectangular, it may be rectilinear design. So depending on that, we will place the positions. And then once the floor planning of the IPs are done, then we'll go for logical placement, meaning we'll place the standard cells in the core area. That's called placement. And then we'll go for clock tree synthesis. Clock tree synthesis meaning we'll design a clock from the root to the sync pin. So that is what. And then signal routing. Signal routing meaning we will route it with the metal layer so that it is physically implementable, right? And then timing closure. Timing closure, when I say our slack that we should see, meaning all the clocks should meet their respective frequencies. So that is what the performance is, as I said earlier. So we have to check the performance verification. That is what timing closure means. And then we will close timing, and then we'll say that we are performance met in this particular chip. And then once the chip is designed, it's not directly will go to the fabrication and it will go to the market, because if our chip does not work, it will cost millions and millions of dollars to the company. So that is where we'll go for a physical verification and sign off of it, saying that this particular chip is okay to work. And then we'll go with the fabrication part of it. And then fabrication guy also, before releasing, he will package it and then he will test it, and then the chip will be finally out to the market. So this is how the VLSI design flow works. Let's see a bit more detailed introduction of it, right? So when I get an idea, and then what are the three things that I should follow is, what is the design feasibility, meaning what is the performance that I can get from it, and what is the advantage that is already, for example, let's take there's a chip that is already available and I am improving some features, right? So what is the advantage that I'm getting from this additional features, right? That is what I wanted to check. So what is the cost of it, and then what is the productivity from it, and what is the power consumption of it, and then what is the performance of it. So these three things are main things. And from the design spec, as I said, what can be achieved and what are the features, and what implementation platform I have to use, whether it is an ASIC or else it is already there that I can program it from other chip. So if it is an ASIC, then which ASIC vendor I should go for, and what is the device family, meaning MOSFET, should I use, or else FinFET should I use, which nanometer I should work on, be it a lower nanometer like 3 nanometer, 5 nanometer, or else it's a 65, 180 nanometer. So this is how we actually should think of. And then time to market, right? So how fast can I do that, and then without so that I can beat the competitors, right? So this is what I should think of. So now, as I said, right, so once it is done, we'll go for a logical and a functional design of it, and then circuit design of it. Once these are available, what we do is we'll go for synthesizing it. Synthesizing, when I say it is like converting the RTL code. RTL code will be in Verilog or a VHDL language, right? So once that is done, that cannot be physically implemented, right? So I should convert into a physically implementable format. So that is what I will convert this RTL code to a netlist, which is gate level netlist, gate level format of it. That conversion is called as synthesis. Once I convert it directly, if I convert, there might be some design performance mismatches to what the RTL designers have simulated and what I am seeing after this conversion, right? So for that, I have to do some optimizations so that I will match the performance that whatever the RTL guy has given to me. So that is what synthesis is. Synthesis is nothing but compiling, which is translating, and then translating the RTL code to the gate level netlist, and then optimizing the design so that I have met the RTL performance. Right? So this is what synthesis. And then so main challenges are like that developing the synthesizable code itself is a big challenge, right? It's not that easy job to convert an assign statement to a level design, because assign statement is non-synthesizable, right? So a lot of assign statements will be used in RTL code. So that is what, and then picking each flip-flop that is to be synthesized, and then seeing the partitioning, and then giving the appropriate constraints to the design, and using the synthesis tool itself is a big task, right? So this is what synthesis guys handle. And then physical implementation or backend implementation, once it is converted to a gate level netlist, again, gate level netlist is not at all physically implementable, right? So I have to get it to a format where I can fabricate the design. So that is where backend guys come into picture, and then their input will be the netlist that is given by the synthesis guys, and the partitioning that is taken care, and then they will start building the placement as I have shown here, right? So floor planning, placement, clock tree synthesis, signal routing, and finally the performance closure. Once it is done, right, they will have to logically verify, right? Logical verification, when I say the RTL guys will give us a RTL code, and then they say that this is the connection that I have given, this is the AND gate, this is the NOT gate that I have used. I should not disturb the functionality of the design after physically implementing it, right? I should verify that the functionality of the design remain intact. So that is what logical verification is called. So I have to compare it with the RTL code, that whatever he has given and then physically implemented is same. So that functionality is same, right? And then logic optimization. When I say logic optimization, to meet the performance, we'll add some extra buffers and etc. So, and then block mapping and placement. So block mapping and placement, when I say, right, block mapping meaning it's a floor planning that we do, and then placement meaning placing the standard cells and the logic in the entire core area that was given to us. Net routing, when I say routing is nothing but connections. So let us say an AND gate is connected to a NOT gate, right? So AND gate is not connected to a NOT gate, that logically will give by in the RTL code, right? So we'll say that output of this pin will be connected to that pin, and then but physically connection meaning we have to connect it with a wire. So that physical wire is nothing but metal layer that will connect this output of this particular AND gate to the input of the NOT gate. So those things we have to do in net routing stage of the physical design of part of it, right? And then these routings also will have R values, C values, because these are metal layers, right? Metal layers do have resistance, capacitance, and inductance, right? So that RLC values that we'll take and see that the performance is also met with respect to them. Let us say I have developed this backend implementation and everything is done, but how do I test my chip, right? I should test my chip functionally, and also I should test my chip logical testing I should do, right? Like stuck-at faults. I should not see any functional faults that will cause my chip to break. So we will study this in digital design part of it in our bachelor's, right? So stuck-at faults, and then stuck-at 1 fault, stuck-at 0 fault. So how do I test them? Because it's physically implemented, everything is transistors there. How do I test it, right? So for that particular thing, I should introduce some more transistors that are specifically for testing. So those are nothing but scan flip-flop insertion that will happen in the physical design part of it. Once this testing is done, then only I can say that my design is DFT free, and then there are no structured faults, functional faults in the design. You can go for verification physically. So when I say physical verification, it was like DRCs that we check. There are some foundry specific DRCs like metal to metal, this much is the spacing, so that I can fabricate properly, right? So we will discuss this in our bachelor's in final year, I think, regarding the fabrication, right? Etching, lithography, etc. For those things to happen properly, we should take care of the layout related verification, which is called the DRC and LVS in physical implementation part, right? And then results. So as I said, design errors are nothing but lithography or else etching related errors like DRCs, LVS, and then etc. are clean. And then our timing reports. When I say timing reports, they are nothing but the performance that we are checking of that particular chip, that is clean or not. What is the challenge that we face during implementation, right? How to reach high performance of that particular chip, and then within the given area, how much buffers I can add, what is the performance. PPA always is a bigger challenge in physical implementation. So now coming to the tools of it, right? Why do we need these tools for, right? So CAD tools are needed for partitioning the design, and then technology mapping. Technology mapping happens in synthesis part of it. RTL to netlist conversion need technology mapping, because I should see which flip-flop should to use and what is the exact mapping that needs to be done, right? And then design entry, DRC. As I said, verification is the important part of the physical design, and that needed tools as well. And place and route. So as I said, from placement, routing, clock tree synthesis, all are done by CAD tools in the semi-custom design approach. That is why the tools are needed for. So some of the tools that we are using in the industry right today, it's synthesis. We are using Synopsys DC compiler and DC Ultra, and now there are Fusion compiler also that is in picture. And then place and route, we are using Cadence and Innovus, and then Synopsys IC compiler 2 for place and route. DFT, when I say DFT, it is nothing but the scan flip-flop insertion for testing. They use Mentep Descent, and then layout extraction, we use StarRC, and then digital sign-off, Synopsys prime time, logic equivalence. As I said, this functional equivalence check, right? Functionally, it should be equal, so that for checking that, we use Synopsys formality or Cadence conformal. And then power checking, which done Cadence Voltus or else Red Hawk is the other tool that the industry uses. And then physical verification, when I say it's DRC LVS, it's caliber that is used. So let's go to the case study that we have, right? Designing a DTMF chip. DTMF is nothing but a dual tone multi-frequency. So in earlier days, when we used to do a trunk call, remember when our fathers or grandfathers, right, when they wanted to talk to someone in America or New Jersey, so they will call to a customer care or customer network center and ask them to connect to this particular person. Then the particular person will connect to that particular frequency. So that is what the DTMF chip is used for. And then this transmits the signals over the telephone line. It actually works on the superposition of two sine waves. That is, let us say there's a sine wave from India that you are calling, and the sine wave that is New Jersey, right? So that in superposition of it. Now, as I said earlier, when I wanted to design a chip, I should give the design specification of it. So this is the functional block diagram of it, and then this is how it looks like. Now I'll give the spec to the designers, saying that my frequency is 350 megahertz. Let's say Indian frequency is 350, and somewhere in US it's 440. So I say that this is the frequency that I wanted to work at, and then this is the power targets that I give. 55 millivolts IR drop, and then power should be within 100 milliwatts, right? And then designers based on that will develop an RTL code accordingly. When I say that, right, when I wanted to design it, as I said, this digital detection algorithm and cone converter latch, right? So these things will be already available in the market, because some of the IP vendors might have developed this DTMF chip, right? So some of the things will be right away available for us, instead of going to the scratch and designing it. According to my spec, I'll buy from the particular vendor, and I call them hard macros. So I'll talk more about it in the next slides. So now, when I say the design specification, the RTL guy will come up with the logic design of it, and he says that for designing this, I have 6,000 instances in the design. When I say 6,000 instances, there are NAND gates, OR gates, every logic that is there in the design, and I need 57 IO pads. 57 IO pads because I need the interface signaling and then interface power, and then there are 6,274 nets. This comes after this is not an important criteria, but this comes after the RTL design. And he says that, so these are the memories that are already available in the market. You can go and buy, meaning 4 macros are these RAM instances that are already available in the design. And the best that we can do is it's in 180 nanometer process technology node that we can develop this particular thing. So this nanometer technology decision will be taken purely based on the performance that we are looking at, the power targets that we are looking at, and the cost. More specifically, it's the cost that matters, right? And then these are the metal layers that we need. So backend implemented. So now once the RTL guy says these are the requirements, these are the things that I have, and you can proceed with the physical implementation of it. He gives the RTL code, he gives me all the inputs that are required, right? So I bought these 4 blue color hard macros from the vendor. Once that is done, I decide the core area that is required for this particular chip. So how I decide the core area is entirely, it's like a number of instances that are there in the design. Each instance which will occupy some particular area, and then multiplied with 6,000 instances give me the core area. So that is how I decide it, and based on the utilization also I can decide the core area. For example, let us say I wanted a 65% of utilization in the design, and accordingly I decide my core area, and then some starting rough estimation will be done using the instance count, and then plus some area for the optimization of buffers, plus some area for the scan flip-flops that are to be inserted, plus some area for the routings and etc. Right? So these are the considerations that were taken while considering the area. So once the area is considered, we go on with the pad placements and then create power routings over it, so that my each and every transistor in my design should receive power. Otherwise, my functionality will go for a toss. So this is but nothing but the floor plan and power planning of the die. Floor planning in the sense we place all the hard macros in the design, and then power planning in the sense we route all the power pins with the metal layer. So there are a few technologies that we wanted to know for the initial background, right? So pad rings, these are nothing but VDD and VSS pads, right? Power pad and the ground pad that covers the entire core area of the chip. Core ring, when I say these yellow colored ones are the core rings. Outside the core area, this takes in power from the pad to the core. So it's like a bridge between the pad and the core. And then follow pins, when I say these are blue lines are the follow pins, these are usually routed in lower metal layers, are required for providing power and ground to each and every transistor. This is how I make sure that each transistor will receive power, right, from the pads. Now this is nothing but the placement stage where we'll place all the standard cells in the design, and then we'll optimize it, and then we'll do a clock tree synthesis. And then I should connect it with physically implementable wires, right? So that is what route stage means. So this is clock tree built and routing is done. The chip looks like this. Now, even then, this is a software. This I do it in a software. I have to physically implement it still, right? So now I'll have to give it to the fabrication guys. So for the fabrication guys to understand, I will convert my database. So the output that I give is called as GDS2. So once this is done, I will convert into the GDS2. So once the route stage is done, what I'll do is I will analyze it first, because I have to meet the specs, right? So once it is done, these are the specs for this following test chip that we have done for test case. So the total power that we are seeing is 99.75 milliwatts, but the target that was given is 100 milliwatts. This is the leakage from each of the transistor. This is the switching power from each of the transistor, and this is the internal power from each of the transistors. This is how total power is calculated, and then we found that 99.75 we are within the spec, so it's okay to tape in. And then this is the performance check that we do. The number of violating paths in timing is 0, and then slack is already positive, so it means our performance is met. So this is how we do the sign off, and once the sign off is done, we'll convert into a fabricatable format, which is called like the GDS2 format. And then once the fabrication team does it, and then fabricates it into a chip, and then they will package it, and then they will test it, and then they will release it to the market. So now, what are the modern trends that are in the design in this industry? What are the modern trends in this industry, right? So we started somewhere around 1 transistor to 2 transistors in the chip to millions and millions of transistors in the chip. So while we are going for millions and millions of transistor, we cannot use the same 180 nanometer or a 270 nanometer node, because 270 nanometer size of the cell will be huge, and then in 5 nanometer or 3 nanometer it will be very less, right? So these are the most recent tech nodes that we have in the design, where it accommodates millions and millions of gates. So, and then 3 nanometer is in research and development state, that will be still come into picture. So with these modern trends, we are going to put in more and more features in the chip, which are more related to AI and sensor related features, right? Let's see what the market is about to tell, right? These trends are from Indian Brand Equity Foundation. So we are doing a chip for venture, for capital, right? For capital, and then and gains and profits, and then technology conversions, and then what exactly that is going on in the market. This is just a glance of it. So India obviously is attracting lots and lots of semiconductor companies from abroad. Maybe in future, Bangalore will become the semiconductor hub, same as the Silicon Valley in US. They are trying to invest more and more. And then in Hyderabad also, Intel started a new research and development center. And then Amazon has started the Asia's largest semiconductor, and then semiconductor, and also the software related stuff in Hyderabad. And then Apple also wanted to start its fabrication of iPhone 11 in India. So this is how the trend, and this is how the capital that they are seeing in India, because of the quality of the chips that we are designing day by day. And then not only the designs, but also the value that we are giving, right? Quality of the chips that we are delivering is also high, and also the market that we are giving, profits that they are making is really huge. So now the technology convergence, when I say now the chip design is entering into the IoTs, it was entering into the AI, it was entering into the sensor based market. It's not in a single platform, it's a multi-platform with multi-featured designs that we are going for a technology convergence part of it, right? And then emergence design startup. So it is not difficult to start up if you have a specific chip in design in mind, and then you should make sure that your chip actually works in the market, right? And gives competition to the toughest semiconductor companies. So that is how we have to plan, and then it is always easy to start up. And then value chain, as I said, right? So we are giving the quality, and then we are giving the capital profit. So that is what our value chain is. And then evolution of the field. So how exactly our field has evoluted, right? So it was like one transistor in 1950 to 3072 core GPU transistor, which has 8 million transistors incorporated in it, right? So that this is how we actually went through the evolution. And then now market rising demand for VLSI. So this is how the capital is looking, right? The companies that are investing in 2015 in India are $14.5 billion, right? But now in 2020, it is expected the investment is $52.58 billion. So that is how the investment in India increased day by day. As the investment and the technology, if you see, we have started here from 65 nanometer to this is 65 nanometer. Even I worked on 180 nanometer, I worked on 28 nanometer. So I started working on 180 nanometer sometimes back. So which is not at all in the map. So, but it was like towards 5 nanometer, the investment that is today that they are running is $600 million, which means as the investment increases, they needed more and more chips, they need more and more engineers. So this is how the opportunity in the VLSI design, VLSI domain, that is increasing day by day. The core semiconductor companies are striving for engineers, best quality engineers to come up and design for them, right? So these are some of the semiconductor companies that are recruiting in the world today. So the topmost comes with Intel, number one semiconductor company, and then Samsung will be there, and then Qualcomm is there, and then these are some of the companies that, of course, TSMC. It's a foundry-based number one company, right? So these are some of the companies that I have covered. Of course, are opening up for India, especially for quality engineers to come up and take design for them, right? And this is how the market is changing. Who all can join, right? So electronics and electrical engineer with strong background in VLSI and digital concepts, and then electronics engineer. Not only electronics and electrical, but recently companies were interested for computer science guys also. They were recruiting with electronics background. They need solid electronic background engineers to join them and design for them, right? So not only electrical and electronics, but they were looking at a couple of options who have the base foundation in VLSI. Thank you. This is about the introduction to the VLSI design, right? Chip design.